Hi, I'm Shay. Welcome to my channel. I'm really here today because it's Monday, November 22nd. So it's 4 days after the Supernatural finale aired. And so I've been going through a lot emotionally the past couple days, and I just had a rant that I just feel like I have to get off my chest. I literally wrote down like all the issues that episode and like the end of the season really had, and it's literally 4 pages. Like, it's crazy. I want to preface this by saying, if you haven't seen Supernatural, don't watch this. If you haven't seen the finale of Supernatural, don't watch this. Or maybe just don't watch the finale. That's my opinion. And it's not my intention, and I hope that I don't offend any of the cast or the crew that worked on the show, or any fan who did find the Supernatural finale enjoyable. I'm actually genuinely happy for you if you found that enjoyable. Personally, I and many, many other fans did not, and I want to talk about some of the reasons that it was not enjoyable, and that I feel like it was a very below subpar episode, period. Before I get into the things that I like, the reason for the rant, I felt like it was really important for me to say that I am a very huge avid fan of Supernatural. The show has meant a lot to me. I've been watching. Haven't seen it. I mean, I wasn't watching it when it first came out. I'm probably later to the game than most. However, the show and the cast have meant a lot to me since I became introduced to it. I had really felt connected to this show. I had the privilege of going to one of the conventions. I think it was in 2017, and meeting. I got to meet and take a picture with Mark Shepard, Misha Collins, Jensen Ackles. I got to take a picture with Rachel Miner and have a conversation with her, and she was so sweet and so kind and genuinely seemed to care about having the conversation. Even when the volunteers were trying to rush us through, she was still trying to, continue the conversation and not just kind of brush us off. And it really meant a lot to me. And this cast and the show means a lot to me, and these characters matter to me. I know that a lot of people feel like if you're saying anything negative about the finale or you're not being a real fan. I feel like you can be a fan and be honest and critical about what you think about the show, and there's a way to do it. And like I said, I hope to not offend anyone because I truly love this show. The show is very important to me. It's probably the most Supernatural is probably either, if it's not my number one favorite show, it's my number two. And I've never connected or identified so much or felt the way that I feel about a cast the way I have with this show. And it's like everybody. And I enjoy the fact that this show and really the cast has made such an effort to make us all feel like a family. And I feel like no matter what you're going through, there's always someone on Supernatural you can identify with, some character, some situation, some storyline that, although it's a supernatural thing, there's something it's rooted in that you can relate to. And I definitely needed to say that I am a fan of the show. I'm not someone just saying something to be negative. Or you can be a fan of the show and not enjoy this episode, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. And you could be a fan of the show and enjoy the episode. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. But that's really just, I wanted to say that before I got into the things that I had, the grievances that I had with this episode, with this episode and the ending of the show. how it was done. So I've since 19 aired, I didn't really like 19, but 19 was bounds ahead and better than 20 was. And one of the things that I genuinely felt from watching 19 and then watching 20 is that I understand that they were recorded after COVID, after they shut down for COVID. And then 19 and 20 happened after they came back. But 19 and 20 feels really disjointed. It doesn't feel like the same season at all. It hardly feels like the same show, but it doesn't at all feel like the same season. It doesn't fit anywhere in with season 15. It doesn't go along. It just doesn't feel like it belongs at all. It feels drastically and distinctively different from the rest of the show. And this season, especially episodes 17 and 18, it is such a drastic turn. It just veered completely away from 18. 18 was a really pretty well done episode with a lot of emotionality to it. And then you have 19 and it just kind of veers off in the other direction. And it's like 17 and 18 didn't even exist. And that really, I feel like, affects the way people perceive it and were able to experience it, because it didn't fit. It felt weird. It felt really disingenuous, especially 20, which I will get to more in a little bit, why it felt so disingenuous. I feel like really it started in 17 where I felt like there was a lot of things that were happening that were kind of like out of character. And really it started with 17 and it started with Dean. And like, I understood Dean's like obsession in that like fervor to get to this point where he was like, everyone was free of Chuck. But it just seemed out of character and out of touch how rabid he was. And then by the end of the episode, we get to see, even though I don't feel like it was done well enough that people really realized it, that it was Chuck, that it was Chuck's manipulation. And Chuck himself said that this is the ending that he wanted, that he had written. So he manipulated and melded and, what's the word I'm looking for? Like molded Dean's character in this episode, and it's like in this little stretch, to be that rabid, desperate character, or that desperate behavior that would push him to the edge that it did, to push him to pull a gun on Sam. Is so out of character. This is somebody who's always protected Sam, who's always done, he would never try to really hurt Sam. Like, that's not in his DNA at all. So it was extremely out of character. I feel like this, especially 19, but more so 20, definitely, I feel like, destroyed 15 years of character development and growth in like one swift second. They immediately reverted back to the season 1 dynamic of this toxic, tragic codependency between the two brothers that they had worked so hard over 15 seasons to get rid of, or to let go of, to do better from. And they took it right back. And I understand that people are like, this is called circular storytelling, and it's going back to the beginning, and it's a great tool in storytelling. Usually when you do that, you're taking it back to the beginning to show the difference from how this is different than the beginning, to show the growth over 15 seasons. And this does the opposite. You have Sam, who wanted, in the beginning, wanted a life, wanted all these things. And you have Dean, who didn't think that he could have any other life but hunting. And now you have 15 years later, 15 years in the beginning, he didn't think he had any worth outside of protecting Sam and everything. He was nothing but a hunter and Sam's brother. And they took that and created this same dynamic over again after 15 years of Dean finally growing, especially this season. I feel like he has grown so much and acknowledging the trauma and the problems that he's been dealing with, his anger, where it stems from, how it's affecting not only himself but the people around him. He has grown. Okay, so like I was saying, this season especially, Dean has grown immensely, as far as seeing that he is worthy of a life, worthy of love, and a lot of that came from the Castiel speech in 1518, seeing that he is responsible for so much. Him being the person he is responsible for so much that has happened in a positive way. That finding out that him being who he is was enough to make Cass care about more than just following orders, and make him want to fight for people because he sees that Dean cares about fighting for people. And you see that Dean finally starts to care about himself and love himself and take the steps toward creating a life for himself. In 20, they show, he adopted a dog, and there is paperwork on his desk after he died where you see that he had gotten a job. He was signing the paperwork for the job. So he was building something for himself. He was honoring the sacrifice that Cass made, even though I'll get to that in a minute about it. Still, that whole situation is still being out of character. But this is someone who was genuinely wanted to live for the first time, really, versus season 1 when all he thought he was capable of was being a hunter and all he thought he was destined for was to die. This is someone who actually finally wanted to live. And you took his character and just boiled it down into your only importance is to die so that Sam gets to have a life. And that is so disrespectful. It boils down the most dynamic, complex character on the show and makes him into a tool and a prop for Sam's happiness. And it goes back to, like I said, it reverts back to that dynamic of season 1 where nothing matters but Sam. And I had a conversation with someone on Instagram, and she talked about how, well, really, the show is about Sam. The show has not been about strictly Sam for a very long time. Maybe it started out that way, but the character of Dean and the way that Jensen Ackles has beautifully portrayed him brought so much to the show that they had to shift the focus from being just mostly about Sam to being about brotherhood. And to say that mostly the fans only care about Sam is a falsehood. It is not denigrating Sam in any way, shape, or form. Oh, it's light. I was like, what is that? It's not denigrating Sam by saying that he is not the sole focus of the show anymore. And even then, you're going back to people who are saying that, the show started with the brothers and needs to end with the brothers, and basically that is their show, that's all that matters. It's not fair and it's not true. The show, again, at its core, yes, it does, their relationship is the core of the show, but the show has not only been about them for a very long time. And a lot of that has to do with Misha Collins Castiel. The fact that the show was on the verge of cancellation, even Eric Kripke himself says that Misha and his version of Castiel completely revitalized the show, and it brought life back into the show, and it increased viewership in the show. So to say that this show the brothers are the only people that matter in the show is unfair and unjust, and it's just not true. A lot of this show's success has stemmed from Castiel and Misha Collins and people who genuinely love Castiel. He is a fan favorite for a reason. And time again, you keep seeing them mistreat the character of Castiel. And by them, I mean the writers. And mistreat Misha, you use him because that people are looking for him. You know that people are watching to see him on the show. And you use it as a way to gain viewers. And I feel like they did that for 19 and 20. And I feel like I'm going to get to that a little bit later as well. But to say that the show only matters because of the brothers is unfair. There are people who watch the show because of the idea and the message that they set forth by saying from season 1, literally, family don't end in blood. And so you say that for 15 seasons, the family doesn't end in blood, to turn around at the end and basically disregard every other character but the brothers, and really disregard every character who wasn't Sam. And it sends a bad message when you spent 15 years preaching that family don't end in blood, just to turn around and end it in blood. Like I said, they reverted back to the idea that Dean's life only exists to serve Sam, that it has to revolve around Sam, and that it went back to, oh, Sam, you're the one. It was always you, Sam. You're always so smart. You're always the smart one. You're always this. And Dean knows better about himself now. He's grown, that he's not going to keep denigrating himself. Throughout this whole series, they've talked about, even Sam has said that Dean is the better hunter, that he's way smarter than anybody, including Dean gives him credit for, that he's one of the most intelligent people that Sam has ever known. It upsets me that you would take Dean's character and try to completely wash that away at the end, at the finish line, to take this, again, dynamic, complex character and boil him down into being Sam's brother, a hunter, a mindless hunter, and cars and pie. It completely washes away the history and the character development and growth that they have spent 15 years cultivating. Even for Sam, even though it seemed like Sam got, this great life, he got the good in this, he got to live and have a family the family he always wanted, and the marriage, and have a normal apple pie life. And even in doing so, Sam looked miserable. At least 20, 30 years later, he's sitting in a car crying. It did a disservice to Dean, obviously, and Cass, and Jack, which is, I'm going to get to in a minute. But even to Sam, that he never really moved on, because he's still crying 30 years later, like it's new to him that his brother is gone. So that was something that was frustrating. One of the issues I and a lot of the fandom have with 19 and 20 is that, again, it's out of character, that there's no grieving for Cass. Like, you see Jack be upset for like 20 seconds, and then you see Dean drinking, but it's never explicitly said that could have been because Cass died, or it could have been because they're on Earth and Chuck just snapped everybody out of existence. You don't know. But there's no grief. He's mentioned twice in 19 and they're like not even a footnote. He's like an end note, like mixed into the afterthoughts. We didn't get to see. And then again, they're using Misha and his character Castiel as a way to keep dangling hope for people to keep watching 19 and 20, and they purposely did it. They went off of they literally had this scene in 15-18, which is so heartfelt and so powerful, and I still want to get back to that in a little bit, that people, and then have him die after that. It's so unjust and unfair that you can't, especially knowing the show, believe that that's how they're going to end it. So people are watching because they just know that there's no way the writers are just going to end it that way. Castiel has been a huge part of this show for 12, 13 years now. This is not he can't not make it to the finale. It's absurd. Then even some of the stuff that they were posting throughout time, making it seem like it was a joke. Oh, where's Misha? Like, they're trying to hide that Misha's there, but really it's them just poking fun at the fact that he's not. And it's legit. It's you dangling and baiting people into watching because you think, you know, that if you keep dangling the possibility of Misha and Castiel being there, that people are going to continue. And then what they did in 19 was cruel to play his voice as a way to somehow appease the fans, knowing that they weren't going to bring him back. And then I'm very much sick. I don't know if I wrote it down, but I've been talking to a lot of people, and I'm tired of the writers using COVID as an excuse, because it's not. They brought back some random vampire from season 1 that nobody remembered. The only reason there was any sort of reaction from anybody is because they had the flashback of her in season 1. She was not important to the story in any way. She was on screen for literally 60 seconds and did nothing for the story at all. It didn't move the story in any way. It just, here's somebody. You could bring her back, and you can bring Mark Pellegrino back to be on camera for 3 to 5 minutes max, and really didn't move the story along that much, other than the fact that you used it to completely demolish Michael's character growth, which I'm going to get into in a minute, and to have someone open Chuck's book, but still not be able to read it. So you can't say that COVID is the excuse for you not having Misha in the 19 or the 20, because he could have quarantined just like everybody. You brought other people back, but you didn't bring him back. And there are so many reasons that could be. I will get into some of my thoughts on that a little bit later. But it was disrespectful to the fans, and it's disrespectful to Misha, and it's disrespectful to his character to play things that way. So I wrote, I don't really understand the point of ending the series on a Monster of the Week. 19 was really rushed, in my opinion. It was just, everything kind of threw into a 40-minute thing. And I feel like for Chuck to be the main villain, that should have been a 2-parter event. That the same way we did for Amara, where we had, this is how it starts, and then, oh my gosh, there's the twist, and then you have another episode to fix everything, for everything to come together. That's what should have been done. So if we were going to make the Monster of the Week, didn't make sense. It shouldn't have been there. They should have did 19 to 20, a 2-parter event, to really give that epic finale that this show deserved, that these characters deserve. Anything less than that is a disservice. A Monster of the Week episode after defeating Chuck is stale. There's nothing exciting about it. There's nothing endearing about it. There's nothing that gives any credence to it. It's nothing poetic about it. It's nothing. It just does nothing. Like I said before, like anybody who's never seen Supernatural could watch the pilot episode and then watch the series finale and miss nothing. They would understand everything. It would change absolutely nothing. And that is disgusting. And it's such a... People will say, oh, this is circular storytelling. It doesn't tell a story. This is how this started. The end. There's no growth. There's no journey. It's just the beginning and the end. And there's nothing in between. And it then makes it seem like the journey doesn't matter. That all that matters is the beginning and the end. It doesn't matter how you get there. And apparently the ending isn't even subjective to the journey. It's not reliant on the journey at all. It's basically saying a show that has for so long been about defying your destiny and all about team free will and being in charge of your own destiny, your own purpose in life, to take it right back to season 1, how everything would have happened had Dean never went back to go get Sam. Sam would have had a white picket fence with a wife and kid and died of old age. And Dean, had he never went back, he would have died young as a hunter. And I think that is does a disservice to everything that you have spent 15 years building. It diminishes the message of the show. It diminishes the growth of every character that you've spent so long developing. It diminishes what this show means to people. And I think that that is a huge disservice to the show itself, to these characters, and to the fans, and to the cast who's worked so hard to give you this quality of a show. Sure, we've had issues, and they've had, episodes that weren't that great or seasons that weren't the best, but they've always managed to turn it. And you wait till you get to the finish line and you're like, yeah, whatever. And so I've heard people say, well, maybe you guys' expectations were too high. I can guarantee you, I don't think anybody went into, after episode 19, I don't think anybody went into 20 with high expectations. The bar was set exhaustingly, depressingly low. And instead of, the bar was so low you could have stepped over it. The bar was so low that you could lay on the floor and roll over it. And instead, the writers took a shovel and dug down underneath the bar and came up the other side covered in mud. And it's like, ta-da, we have a finale. And that is really disappointing because I feel like everyone involved, not just the fans, but the characters, the actors, everyone deserved a better ending than that. And to see that Dab would even say, Andrew Dab would say, this is what I felt like doing. And I know that only maybe 30% of the audience is going to find this enjoyable or find this any happiness in this episode and still think it was okay. And I'm going to get back into that in a minute as well. I do believe I wrote that down on another page. Then I've gone back and forth with people on Instagram. We're talking about, Dean's death is it makes sense because, they don't have that plot armor that they had with Chuck. And so, of course, he would die a normal human death or something like that. Aside from Chuck's plot armor, which they haven't had all season, if we're being honest, with the exception of when they got the luck from the lady, they haven't had it. It is not even arguable. It is fact within the bounds of the show that Dean Winchester is literally the best hunter. He's better than John. He's better than Sam. He's better than Bobby. It's been said over and over again by many characters on the show that he is the best hunter. It doesn't make sense that he would die in such a stupid way. He literally defeats God himself within the bounds of this show, and he dies on a piece of rebar. It doesn't make any sense. It's not poetic. It's not sending the message that anybody thinks it's sending. It's not saying, well, he's human now and he's a regular human like anyone else. He can die anyway. No. And he always there. Oh, he said he wanted to go out swinging and da-da-da. No. He didn't even go out swinging. Like, it was stupid. If you were going to kill Dean, and I love Dean, he's one of my favorite characters, I could have accepted a Dean death if it made sense. If it made sense, if it served actual purpose, if it was well done. I would have been upset that he died, but I could have been okay with it because it would have been well done. If it was well done, if it made sense, if it moved the story along in some way, like how I was with Castiel. I am sad that Castiel died, but his sacrifice made it possible for Dean and Sam and Jack to stop Chuck. That death served a purpose. And it allowed this group of people, this family, to save the world through that sacrifice. That made sense. That was poetic. That was beautiful. It had a purpose. It served the story. What happened to Dean did not. The only purpose it served was to be a tool and a vehicle to give Sam what he wanted, to make the show yet again about Sam. So that's an issue that a lot of people have with this finale. Um, then to say that, he literally spared Chuck. Chuck is going to grow old and die, and Dean dies the next episode. It makes no sense. It's not fair. And I understand that death doesn't make sense and it's not fair, blah, blah, blah. No, it's not okay. Like I said, if he had died in a way that made sense, in a way that was genuine, or it served a purpose other than propping someone else up, that would be different. I have a lot of issues with the things that were said before. So I remember earlier this year where they were at a convention and someone asked Jensen how he felt about if he had read the ending or he knew the ending of the series and how he felt about it. And he said that it didn't really sit well with him initially, and that he was kind of asking around, and people were saying maybe you're too close to it, maybe you're too emotional about it, you're not seeing it objectively, and to try to push him into thinking that this was okay. And he talked about in a later interview recently about how he and Jared were able to sit down with the writers, and I think that maybe going into it they thought it was going to be more of a collaborative thing, or more of a brainstorming session, but it was basically they get there and the writers are saying this is what we have, take it or leave it, and there was no real input accepted on the ending. And one of the reasons I have a problem with that is because all of the writers on the show, I can go back and see. I don't think every writer that's on this show has been there from the very beginning. Jensen has. There's nobody who knows Dean Winchester better except maybe Eric Kripke because he created him. But even still, Jensen is Dean and Dean is Jensen, and nobody knows Dean Winchester better than Jensen Ackles. So to not take any input in that dynamic, and this being his final season, the final season of the show, it doesn't make sense to me to not even hear him out, or to say that this is what it is, take it or leave it. We're not giving you any other options, basically. And I think that was really upsetting to me. And I don't have this down, but I'm literally as more days go by, there are more things coming out that prove that them using this idea of COVID to excuse some of the things that are missing from the finale, or try to excuse the poor writing, is really just an excuse. They talked about, heaven would be full of, these characters, and we're gonna do kind of like a montage of characters that we lost, and they're all here in heaven, but we weren't able to do that because of COVID, which is not necessarily true. Because they had that plan. If that plan was true, they had that plan months ago when they first started filming, and when they had plans for filming the end, and they knew what they were going to do. You don't approach someone right before you start filming to ask if they want to come back for a reunion. The fact that they have Harvell's in heaven, the bar, and yet you never reached out to the actress Samantha Ferris who plays Ellen, and you never reached out to the actor that plays Ash, means that you never really had the intention to bring back this whole cast of characters that you say you did. You said the only ones that you then mentioned later on was Mary and John, but you have Harvell's. You say that we can't ask people to come in quarantine for 2 weeks, but you brought the girl back from season 1, and you could quarantine her for 2 weeks for her to be on screen for a minute that nobody remembered and did nothing for the story, but you couldn't bring Misha back. You couldn't bring Alex back. Alex, who was already quarantining because he was in episode 19, he was already up there quarantining. You couldn't. Misha, who has genuinely always given to the show, and the fans who care so much about the fans and this family, would have gladly spent 4 weeks quarantining, 2 in the beginning and 2 in the end, if it meant doing justice to his character that he cares so much about and doing right by the fans and the story. You're not telling me that Misha wouldn't have come back for that, because I know that that's not true. That was a choice that the writers made. The issues that we have, the main issues that we have, aren't even about appearances from other characters. It's the writing, and that has nothing to do with COVID, because you had what? April, May, June, July, August, whenever, at least 4 to 5 months to rework those 2 episodes into something that could have been amazing. And if you're going to use COVID as an excuse, then why not wait? Because I can gladly tell you and completely tell you that fans of the show would have waited longer if it meant they got 2 quality episodes rather than you rushing to get these 2 out. There was so much that could have been done, that could have been fixed, that could have made more sense to the story and been more true to the story and more true to these characters had you done that, instead of saying, well, we're going to change and make minor changes because of COVID, but we're going to keep the end result the same. It's very upsetting, and it's disrespectful to keep using COVID as an excuse for the choices that you made. And now you don't like that. Maybe you don't like the reaction to the choices that were made before COVID even became a thing. There is still things going around. I don't know if this is true or not. And if it is, it's very upsetting that they did have, I know that Misha for a fact said that originally there was a different ending for Castiel, that he originally wasn't, the ending we got with him going to heaven and fixing heaven with Jack wasn't the original ending for him. And he didn't go into details because he doesn't know what he's allowed to say. He didn't really want to rock the boat, and I respect that. I respect and accept that, because I understand how it can affect his livelihood after this. It can affect whether or not he's going to have a relationship with this or any other network because of what he says now. They're saying, everywhere I see it, they're saying that it's true, but I don't know that it's true. I'm just going to keep saying it's a rumor out there that they had originally planned to bring Misha back and he would be in Dean's heaven, but he wouldn't be Castiel, that he would be Jimmy. What purpose would that serve to the story? Jimmy didn't really know Dean. He had no relationship with Dean. Why would he be in any part of contacting Dean in heaven? It doesn't make sense. And it goes back to, I don't know if I wrote it down, but a lot of the issues that people have with these 2 episodes is how, besides the queer baiting that's going on, it seems very homophobic. And I, as a fan of the show for so long, I had always heard people talk about the show as being queer baiting, and I didn't understand what that meant. And because I, a straight female, have never had to really experience that or think about it, it didn't click to me what people meant. And I was like, no, they're not doing that. And these last 2 episodes have shown me they genuinely are. I don't think it's the cast. I'm not even sure definitively if it's the writers. I think that it's a combination of the writers and the network and trying to figure out, do they want to take that step? And I think they feel like they gave us the Castiel confession, but even then trying to leave it so it's not, they left it kind of ambiguous, even though to me it's not ambiguous at all. He said it is what it is. It was a romantic confession. And in all honesty, you should be able to know that that was a romantic confession. What did he want with Dean that he couldn't have? He already had Dean's friendship. He already had his, this family bond with him. So what else could he have wanted that he didn't already have but a love? And they have this part of the reasoning that people are upset because after Cass's confession, they can't show Dean grieving for Cass at all because now they're worried that it's going to read as gay or bisexual. And so they don't want to do that. And that makes a lot more sense. It's really unfortunate and it's really upsetting because even if Dean wasn't in love with Cass, he still loved him. That was his family. That was his friend. That was his best friend. And to just completely diminish that relationship and not even acknowledge the pain that he's going through and to basically silence him. He never gets to grieve. He doesn't get to talk about what happened. And it's, again, out of character for him to not explain anything. It's out of character for Sam to not ask why the hell the Empty would even take Cass. Like, Jack understands and knows why the Empty took Cass, why the Empty would take Cass. But Sam has no idea about the deal. He doesn't know anything about why, any reasoning for why the Empty would take Cass back. And he doesn't even ask. Because, again, that would be opening Dean up to have to talk about his feelings towards Cass in any shape, way, or form. And then they don't want to risk having Dean read as gay or bi. And I think that that's really sad and disturbing. And again, it's unlike who Dean is as a character. It's unlike who he's been in the series. Anytime that Cass has died on the show, Dean has been a wreck. And the one time that he makes a declaration of love to Dean, all of a sudden it's like they write him as he doesn't care at all. And I think that that is so disgusting, and it does a complete disservice and disrespect to this character and to the actor Jensen Ackles for what he has brought to the show and brought to this character. To effectively silence him is just really wrong. And people talked about how the death of Castiel kind of fed into the bury your gays trope. And I was watching the panel with Misha the other day, and I feel it was yesterday. And he made a good point that the reason that Castiel's death doesn't necessarily fall into the bury your gays trope is because his death was a choice that he made for himself, and because it served a purpose to the overall story. However, what I've noticed and other people have noticed is that Dean's death more closely fits into that bury your gays trope because they killed him before he could even acknowledge that, before he could even, because there's no way for them to continue writing the story with Dean in it without him acknowledging those feelings. And for him to acknowledge any of those feelings and what just happened would be risking him being seen as gay or bi. And so the only way to keep that from happening is to kill him off. So put him in heaven and have the only person he interact with until Sam gets there is Bobby. And even when Cass, his name is brought up, he doesn't, ask Cass is here. He doesn't say, he's silenced. And the next thing, he doesn't say anything for a while. And then he's just like, I'm going to go for a drive. It's so out of character. And it really is. It does read as homophobic. And people who are straight, who don't understand, like I'm straight. And it came for me to see it from other people's point of view and see, the post where it's really explained well, to see that it really does read as homophobic. And it's disappointing because there are so many people from the LGBTQ community who are avid members of this family, this SPN family, who gained so much from this show. There's so many people who say the characters in this show help them, come out, help them feel comfortable with themselves. And to take that and to take this stance when so much of your fan base is in this community is really hurtful, and it's disrespectful to them. Another thing I will say, that stems from 1519, is that yet again this show found a way to screw over Adam, and it was like nobody in the show cared. Adam was dead again. He went through, probably he has had the hardest time on this show of anybody. Out of everybody on this show, he deserves better more than anyone. He deserved the world. And I will forever feel that way. And it's sad for him to be this literal like punching bag for this show for so long. And it just made me sad that he got screwed over yet again. And there was, again, no grief. They just kind of stepped over. It was a footnote. Oh, Adam's dead again. Okay, well, too bad. Sucks for him. And that was disrespectful. We have Michael. And I have always personally liked our version of Michael, not so much the otherworld Michael, but the main Michael from our show. And he went through growth. Firstly due to Adam. Him and Adam had made great strides together from being locked up together. And then when they got out, you could see that Michael was different than he was when he went in. And then you have Castiel showing him the truth about Chuck. And Michael made a lot of growth and developed over that episode, over all that time. And to take that and revert him back to being daddy's little boy in this episode for no real reason, it just completely disregarded his character growth and disrespected it and then killed him off. And that, I feel like, Jake Abel, he deserved better. He did such a great job with that role, and he and his character deserve better in that stance. Another issue I have, I'm still on the first page, with the finale, was that, at the end they're saying, yeah, Jack brought Cass back from the empty. And neither of them decided to tell Sam or Dean that Cass was alive. Completely out of character. Makes no sense. It wouldn't happen. Dean had this. So between 18 and 20, not even between 18 and 20, between 19 and 20, Jack brought Cass back. And Cass, who had just made this declaration of love to Dean, doesn't even reach out to him. Dean is dying, and neither Jack nor Cass reach out to Dean or Sam to say that, hey, Cass is really alive. Even if you're not going to see each other again, at least let them know. So they're not grieving. I mean, not that they were grieving, because the writers didn't decide to do that, but so that they're not grieving for someone who's not dead. I was very proud of Jack in episode 19 that he proved Castiel and Kelly right, that he did save the world. And I was very proud of him and happy for him, because I know that is something he wanted to achieve. He wanted to prove that he was this good person and that they were not wrong to take care, to believe in him. And that was great. I don't like that they put the responsibility of the literal whole world on the shoulders of a 3-year-old who has never gotten the chance to live a life of his own, to make real decisions of his own. Literally a couple episodes ago, he was literally asking his dad for permission to join social media. He has a talking teddy bear. He's literally a toddler in a 20-year-old body, and you put the responsibility of the whole world on his shoulders, and it's not fair. Again, if this show is about defying destiny, just because he saved the world doesn't mean he has to now be responsible for it. He rebuilt heaven, so there's a chance that he brought back some angels or something. there's a way that they could have done this and had him save the world and not have him completely walk away from the story, walk away from his family, and without all of that on his shoulders. He has Amara, he has Castiel. There's so many different ways that could have transpired without him having to sacrifice everything and give up a chance at anything other than this. And that made me so sad. When I watched episode 19, it just felt weird to me. Like 19 just didn't feel, it didn't feel real to me. It didn't feel, like I said, it didn't feel like it fit. And like I got sad with the little montage. I teared up. But when the show was over, I literally kind of sat here for a while because I couldn't figure out how I really felt. Like I just felt weird and it felt unsettled. And I cried, like really cried, because I just felt like Jack deserved better. He's a literal child, and he deserved to be able to do things and to figure things out for himself. And he deserved to be able to have, even if he never had kids, he deserved to at least experience this family that he has. I also had an issue with the fact that in the beginning of 19, Sam is, so determined to get to Eileen. He's so emotional about it. They spent all this time hyping up a Sam and Eileen relationship. And by the end of the episode, he's not thinking about her at all. She's literally never spoken of again. And maybe in 20, this blurry image of this brunette woman is supposed to be Eileen. They could have done a better job at making sure that people knew that that's what that was. I don't know if she was supposed to be Eileen or if she was just some faceless woman, which is another issue on the show, as to be a prop family for Sam. And that was an issue. I, like a lot of other people, felt some type of way about, I don't understand the purpose of having the Castiel confession if it's never going to be brought up again. If they're going to diminish it, they're going to spend 2 episodes diminishing it, and diminishing the sacrifice and never acknowledging it, just being a footnote. Why even do it? It was a beautiful scene. It was a beautiful episode. It was beautifully acted between Misha and Jensen. And it's like you have this amazing thing and you just drop it. And I feel like a lot of that happened a few times with the stories from the last maybe 4 episodes of the show. Like I said, in 15-17, they took the time to put into no unclear words, no uncertain words, that Castiel has always been the one with free will. That this version of Castiel is the reason that this version of our Earth is different than the others, because he didn't follow the script that Chuck wrote for him. And because of that, Castiel made it able and possible for a lot of the things that happened throughout these seasons to happen, because he is the one with free will. And it seems really weird to bring that up and not only kill him later, but never delve into the reality of that situation, and the reality of what was said by Chuck. That is a huge revelation, to say that this character is the reason that this world, this universe is so different, that he's the only Castiel to not follow these orders. Out of all these different universes, he's the one that went completely off course. And they bring this up, and it's a big revelation. It's really important, and they do nothing with it. Why even say it? it's one of those things where I'm like, you're dropping the ball. Like, this could be a huge writing moment. It could be a huge storytelling moment, and you do nothing with it. It's one of those things where it's like you're consistently dropping the ball with things that could have made this story better. Again, 1518, for example, where they had the empty attack Jack and say that Jack made it loud, and you never mention it again. They don't acknowledge what it means. It's never brought up. Nothing. That's a big plot hole. What does that mean? Does that mean that everything in the empty woke up? What does it mean that you made it loud? We never get an answer. That could have been epic. That could have tied in into 19 and 20. And instead of doing 20 as a monster of the week, that tied into how they took down Chuck. There's so much that should have and could have been fleshed out with that. And instead, it's left as another plot hole, especially when the writers themselves said that by episode 20, there would be no more ambiguity. There would be no more unanswered questions. And there are so many unanswered questions. There's so much ambiguity. And they just walked away like, great job, guys. We did great. No. Like I said before, my issue with them taking the most complex character on the show and boiling him down to pies and cars and creating him as a tool, that's wrong. It's really unfortunate. I feel like I said this before, but a big issue that we have for this is that all 15 seasons of the show, the motto of the show, other than, the family business, has been the family doesn't end in blood. It's been said so many times by so many characters in so many ways. And then for you to completely disregard that for the final episode by basically saying F every character but the Winchesters, but really even more F every character that's not Sam. Can you imagine having someone in your life for 12 to 13 years who has saved you and your brother so many times, who has helped and made it possible for you and he to save the world so many times, but now all of a sudden he doesn't count as family? Jack literally saved the world, and in the end, he doesn't matter either. None of these relationships matter. Sam is supposed to be in love with Eileen, and they have this bond, and they have her. He brought her back from the dead, and she's teaching him sign language, and they're doing all these things. But in the end, she doesn't matter either. The only thing that matters is these brothers, but really Sam. So much so that they create this prop family that has no tie to anything. This faceless, blurry image of a wife who's never introduced. We have no idea who she is, where they met. You don't know anything. She's a prop. And they create this prop son and figure that they're doing something by naming him Dean. It's not doing anything. It doesn't do anything. It serves no purpose within this bounds of this story, this show, this universe. It does nothing. Again, I talked about how the writers disregarded the apprehensions that Jensen had, because who basically knows this show as well, if not better than most people, and definitely knows Dean as well, if not better than anybody. To see that happen more than once, I've seen and heard different instances over the years where the writers completely disregard some of the ways that the actors feel that the things that they're writing don't fit the character, or that they feel will not be well received. For example, the fight scene between Lucifer and Michael at the end of season 13 that everyone hated, Jensen told them ahead of time that this would not be well received, and it was not respected. It wasn't listened to. And now you have this, and it turns into a complete catastrophe that nobody liked, and you still didn't learn from that. We talked about how they keep the way that especially when Sam was having like the hell what is the word I'm looking for? Like flashbacks, and he kept thinking he was still in hell, and he kept seeing Lucifer. It is implied several times during that storyline that Lucifer raped Sam. It's implied several times by things that Lucifer has said. And the writers then kind of disregard that. And it's weird that you have someone who literally tortured Sam, who again is implied raped Sam, and now you have him working with Sam. You have Sam working side by side with this person. That is not in character. It doesn't matter the stakes. It's not something that would happen. It's not true to the character, and it's not true to the story, and the writers just disregarded that and kept going. So those are some of the issues that we have when you continuously do things like that and you're wrong, and instead of acknowledging that you're wrong, you're going to keep going down that same path and say, we know better than you, when you don't. Like I also said about Dean's death, the idea that Chuck gets to live and grow old while Dean dies young after he spared him when they could have killed him. That doesn't sit well with me. Like I said, the idea that the ending would have been the same had Dean never went to go get Sam, it all would have ended the same way, is upsetting. It's poor storytelling, it's poor writing, and it diminishes the point of the 15-year journey they've been on. I'm also upset that no one was at his funeral. I'm sure that they're going to say that that was due to COVID, but again, at the very last shot of the episode, you see like 100 people on a bridge, no mask in sight. They're all huddled around each other to say goodbye. You could have had a couple characters come to his funeral. You could have had Alex, who again was already quarantining. You could have had Jack there. You could have had Donna there. There's so many different people, and this should have been there. Dean deserved a funeral where he was actually celebrated and appreciated. If you were going to give him that crap death, the least you could have did was give him a good funeral, which they did. Like I said, they showed the papers on his desk. Dean was getting a job and making a life for himself and decided to kill him off anyway. It's really upsetting, and a lot of people pointed this out. For you to take a traumatized character who has spent so much of his life thinking the only way that he would experience any peace or happiness would be with his death, who has been pretty much suicidal, borderline suicidal for most of the show, for a great chunk of the show, to put that, to show that on camera, to show that he has felt that way for so long, and then to completely fulfill that by saying, yeah, he's going to have peace and happiness, but it only happens once he dies. It's a very dangerous message to send to people who identify with Dean, especially on that level. You know that it's a fact that there are a large number of fans who struggle with mental illness within this community, this supernatural family, that deal with depression and anxiety and things of that nature, and who have been suicidal, who feel like this show and this cast have given them, helped them see that they should keep fighting. It's a dangerous message to send to people who feel that way, that they will have peace and happiness, but only after they've died. It's abhorrent to say that, to do that, and to send that message out to Dean and everyone who identifies with him. It's a huge disservice to his character, to his development, to his growth. It is a huge disservice to the fans who have supported this show, who have gone through suicidal ideation, who have gone through, depression. To send that message is unacceptable. Again, talking about Dean and him not deserving to die, especially the way he did, not deserving to die young. He deserved to have a life of his own, because out of the brothers, Sam has had several instances where he was able to go off and have a life of his own. and experience things on his own accord, and live on his own terms. Dean has never had that opportunity. He's never had the opportunity to have a real life for himself. And then there was someone who was saying, well, he had a chance when he was with Lisa and he gave it up to go back to hunting. He didn't give up his chance of happiness with Lisa to go back hunting. He gave up his chance of happiness because he still had that negative codependent relationship with Sam. He didn't give up his relationship and that life for hunting. He gave it up for Sam. He gave it up to be with Sam, and Sam was still hunting. So therefore he was hunting. It never said that he didn't want that life. In fact, there's several times throughout the series that he did. He talked about how he used to want to be a firefighter. He talked about how he did want a life of his own and a house of his own. And when the episode with the Jinn, when he had that, he had a place of his own. He was visiting his mom. He had a job. He was happy there. He left because it wasn't real, and because it wasn't real because he was dying and he would be leaving Sam alone. That's why he gave that up. Even in later seasons where he's saying to Sam that he always pictured his perfect ending would be him, Sam, and Cass on a beach somewhere with some beers. That is not a man who didn't want to live, who didn't think he had a life. That's a man who before thought he didn't have the opportunity, he didn't have the chance, he didn't have the ability to have that. But now he finally did. And the show took it away from him. The show made, wrote this character growth and developed this character into someone who wasn't suicidal anymore, who wanted to live, and decided to repay that and gift him death anyway. Like I said, the whole show has been about defying your destiny, but this episode completely disregards that. They had then again another plot hole would be that they had Jack bring everybody back on Earth and he fixed heaven. Why would Jack do all those things but bring monsters back? It makes no sense. And I may be misremembering this. I know that Cass said that that Jack would save the world. But I don't remember if he said something about paradise or not. But regardless, it doesn't make sense that Jack would bring back the monsters too. So I feel like that's a plot hole. They in episode 19 said that Jack would be hands off, but then in 20 they have him as reworking heaven completely, redesigning heaven after he said that he would be hands off and he wouldn't be involved. Like I said, the writers wrote the cast is no longer in the empty and he helped rebuild heaven, but neither he nor Jack would let the Winchesters know he was alive, which is completely out of character for both of them. Another issue I have, and it's not the finale related, it's more at 18, is that we found out later that there was stuff cut from the Castiel Dean confession scene. That there was way more reactive and emotional parts and reactions from both Dean and Cass that were cut. And again, I feel like that feeds back into the homophobic stance because that's not the first time that that's happened. There is reports from, I don't remember which episode it was, where it's this Dean and Cass scene or something. They're in the scene together and there's like, Jensen is like cradling Misha's face, and people who were on set saw it and they talked about it, but it was cut from the episode. And there are other instances of that going back throughout the show of things that were cut and reworked to avoid sending a certain message. And so that bothers me. The idea, they have mentioned a couple times about the possibility of a revival a few years down the line or a movie. But how does killing both main characters in the finale leave the series open for a revisit in the future, especially since they had Sam die old. So he lived a whole life. He has a family that he leaves behind, a son. How does that open it up for the two of them to come back if you kill them both? And Sam died old. So now how are you going to bring him back unless you bring him back, do some type of finagling to bring him back at another age? What does that then do to his family dynamic? On the 4th page, guys. This episode, and I'm going to be really honest, Castiel is my favorite character. And this show and the writers have done a disservice to this character who legit saved and revitalized the show. He was treated as less than a footnote when he is and always has been a very huge part of the show. Misha Collins came on for this role. He was only supposed to be in 3 episodes, and here we are 13 years later, and he has become one of the biggest parts of the show. He is, whether they want to acknowledge it or not, the writers or the network want to acknowledge it, the third lead. So yeah, he's been a huge part of the show and a huge part of the success of the show. We talked about how the show was kind of headed towards cancellation before Castiel came on, and he had such a good appeal to the audience and a good reaction from the audience that he was kept on past the 3 episode mark that he was initially brought in for. And they talked about, I read about how in season 7, when they killed Castiel, how their ratings took a hit, a really big hit, and they kind of had to, hustle to bring him back. So I feel like this, especially this season, they have done a big job, or they've done a lot of disrespectful things to Misha. And he, again, has played such a huge part in this show, and he is pretty much, I would say, equally as responsible for the success of the show as Jensen and Jared are, since he joined the cast. Like I said, there was no real resolution for the Castiel confession. There was no mention of it. There's no acknowledgement of it. There was no resolution to that story, and it's really upsetting because that was such a beautifully written and conducted episode for them to just leave it without any type of resolution or finish or conclusion is really upsetting. And it's a waste. And it's a waste, which is why a lot of people feel like if you weren't going to do anything with it, and you didn't know how to continue or give it a real accurate conclusion, then you shouldn't have touched it in the first place. And I can understand that. The idea that Dean nor Sam would look for Cass or try to rescue him from the empty doesn't sit with me, and it's not in character. It's completely out of character for both of them, especially Dean. Dean stayed behind a year in purgatory looking for Castiel. It doesn't make sense that this happens and he does nothing. He doesn't make any attempt to find him. He doesn't ask Jack to bring him back. Nothing. And it's out of character that Jack wouldn't have immediately just brought him back while he's on Earth. Like I said before, them killing Dean at the end to give Sam a normal life is not poetic. It's not beautiful. It's not good storytelling. It's robotic. It's a reflex. It's a reflex of season 1. It just falls back onto an outdated dynamic that they outgrew, with yet again making Dean give up everything and sacrificing everything, including himself, so that Sam could have something, which is what he's done his whole life. In contrast, you have Swan Song, which was beautiful. It was poetic. It was dynamic. and you have Sam willing to give up everything to and pushing Dean to have a life of his own. That's beautiful. That is poetic because Dean has already given up everything for Sam. And in Sam's last moments, he's saying, I want you to have the life that you never got a chance to. That is beautiful. That is good storytelling. This is not. This is a reflex. This is completely robotic. It's completely falling back on an outdated, diminished capacity of the first season. It's that dynamic that doesn't exist anymore, that they have done so much to grow out of, to immediately revert back to that dynamic does a disservice to the story as a whole. It's not beautiful storytelling. It's not, bringing it back to the beginning. Bringing it back to the beginning would have shown the growth. They didn't do that. They completely disregarded the growth. Then we're talking again on like Instagram and stuff. You see that there are things that are missing and we don't know why. Throughout the year, there were back behind the scenes photos and things that showed, Cass and Onion Field that's never addressed again in this, in these episodes. You see Cass with Uriel, and it's never acknowledged. So where was that supposed to be in the grand scheme of things? That was cut, and we want to know why. And my last thing is not serious. I mean, it is, but it's like, it's kind of afterthought. Who is taking care of baby now? If Sam and Dean are still in heaven, who is taking care of baby on earth? These are the questions that need answers. But thank you for sitting here and listening to my rant. I feel like I had to get it out. I've been like angry and crying for 4 days now. Is it 4 or is it 5? Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Like 4 or 5 days. I have so many. Thankfully, going through Instagram, you see all the different memes that are out about the episodes, and it's the only thing that's giving me that, and like old SNL skits are the only thing that's getting me through any of this. I feel like there's more that are like every day. It's kind of like more things that are coming out that are bothering me. The idea that you never like even reached out to these actors and actresses that did so much for your show is hurtful. And the way that people are talking about it, especially the Dean death and how it basically serves his purpose, which was to sacrifice for Sam, it's upsetting me. And the thing that is making it worse is that I hate it. It's kind of making me start to resent Sam's character, because even at the end, they still had to make Dean give up everything yet again for Sam. And it's just so unfair. And I don't want to feel that way because I do love Sam. But the way that it was written and the way it was conducted has definitely started to make me kind of resent him. And then there's other, ideas that things were edited and fixed and done that the way it was to kind of push Walker, to kind of lead as like a, not like an advertisement, but kind of like a way to drum up excitement for Walker. And, I hope that's not true, because that's very upsetting. And if it is, it's very upsetting. And it definitely changes the way that I look at a lot of the things and people involved in these decisions. So again, I respect that my opinion and the opinions of the people who are upset may not match the opinions of those who found it enjoyable. I am genuinely happy for anybody who found enjoyment in that episode. I don't agree with you, but I'm happy that at least somebody found it enjoyable. I'm happy that it didn't ruin their experience for the show. It didn't ruin my experience for the show, because I can honestly guarantee you I'm never watching episode 20 again. And hopefully if I ignore it long enough, I'll forget it. So I'm not going to allow it to ruin my experience of a show that has meant so much to me. But I know there's some people who are very upset and hurt by the way that they did things, and that they don't want to watch the show anymore, that it hurts them, that it diminishes their relationship with the show. And it makes me sad that anybody feels that way. So I'm happy for anybody who felt that this was a good ending, that they were happy with. I'm happy. I'm not trying to disrespect you or your opinion if you feel differently. I'm definitely not sending any hate to the actors or the crew. I'm not even really sending hate to the writers. I'm very upset with the way things did, especially Dad, because even though I went into it with low expectations, I still had faith that Dad was going to pull us through, that Dad was going to save it. And he completely went the other way for me. So I'm not sending hate to the writers. It's okay to be critical of something that you care about. I think that people feel like if you say that you're a fan of a show or you're a fan of something, that you can't say if something is wrong or something, is incorrect, something is not valid. That you can love a show and still be critical of it. You don't have to be a yes person. Because I'm a fan, I love everything about it. I love every episode. I don't hear people having these same complaints when people say that they didn't like Bugs, or when they say they didn't like Bloodlines. I didn't see anybody attacking people and saying you're not a fan if you don't like Bugs. You're not a fan if you don't like Bloodlines. So you can't tell someone they're not a fan because they don't like the finale, or they're upset and they feel like the way they feel that their characters were underrepresented. They didn't get the things that they deserved. I feel like we can all agree to disagree without it being a battle or feel like you have to attack somebody. So again, I respect that your opinions may not connect with mine and they may not agree with mine. That's fine. We can agree to disagree respectfully. I hope that there will be no hate going on, people hating on each other. I would like it to respectfully disagree and just keep it pushing. But again, I just want to say thank you for listening. I know this is gonna be close to an hour and a half. Probably nobody's gonna listen to it, but I just really felt like I needed to say it. Thank you for anybody who did watch all the way through and did listen. And I'm down if you want to put anything in the comments and have a conversation and exchange opinions or ideas or anything or feelings, as long as nobody's trying to invalidate other people's feelings. But again, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.